In the last few years, terrorism has been an ever-increasing threat across the whole of Europe.
We've had some news. The time now is 7:30. Just in the last few minutes, we're reporting that two explosions have been heard at Brussels.
Coming on here to tell you about a situation unfolding right now.
You're watching Sky News. Up to 77 people have been killed in the city of Nice.
Similar to gunfire have been heard close to
the Metropolitan Police have deployed more armed officers in the wake of recent and increasing terror attacks in Europe.
As a result of this growing threat, on the 1st of April 2016, the National Police Chiefs Council outlined their intentions to start training around 1,500 extra firearms officers to help protect the public. The increased presence of armed police officers in Newcastle has split opinion.
Well, a few days ago I was in town and came across two armed policemen outside John Lewis and Eldon Square.
I think they're very scary, actually.
Initially, it made me feel a little bit nervous, a little bit intimidated.
You know, you just see them, you're not really that bothered, you just let them go.
I like the fact they've got it on them, but I'm not sure if it is actually increasing our safety.
It made me think there was an imminent terrorist attack.
It's nice to know that they have the capability of reacting to such awful attacks which we've seen in Westminster and across the world.
The National Armed Uplift Programme, announced last year, aims to increase the number of armed police officers across the country by up to 50%. In order to achieve this goal, the Home Office distributed £140 million to a number of UK police forces. One of these forces was Northumbria Police.
My name's Louise Galliot-Thornton. I'm the inspector for the Firearm Support Unit and also the Marine Unit in Northumbria Police. So day to day, I'm in charge of ensuring that all of our staff are trained, that they're deployed and that they're tasked appropriately. I need to ensure that we provide an armed policing response across the whole force area.
So could you briefly just describe the kind of weapons that the police situation in Newcastle will be using?
Yeah, so all of our ARVs, which is our armed response vehicles, they're double crewed. So things that you would expect from your usual police officers, so handcuffs. We also carry tasers, we have CS gas. We will also carry a Glock.
The Glock, the most widely used law enforcement pistol worldwide. It's light, reliable, and fires a 9mm bullet at 350 metres a second.
They will carry that overtly. If a member of the public sees them out and about, regardless of where they are, they'll have a Glock in a holster. We also use carbines.
Carbines are long-arm firearms, meaning they have longer barrels. They're similar to rifles, but smaller and lighter. The Heckler & Koch MP5 is their most commonly used model.
They give the officer capability for slightly longer range. Glocks are used for quite short range stuff, but if we're patrolling out, for example, at shopping centres, we'll use the carbines. We've also got an intermediate rifle.
A weapon that's less powerful than a typical assault rifle, but has significantly longer range than a pistol. The armed police in this country typically use a semi-automatic SIG 516.
Which again gives a greater capability for if we are out in things like the Metro Centre or Eldon Square.
Controversy over the increased presence of armed police officers in Newcastle first came to light when they were seen patrolling the Christmas markets last December. After backlash on social media, the force released a statement explaining that the armed officers were not there because of any intelligence of a specific threat. So why are we seeing more armed police on the streets of Newcastle?
We're obviously conscious that, people are maybe concerned as to why that's happened, but what you've got to think about is our geography. If there were to be a sophisticated or any sort of terrorist attack in Northumbria, it is just us.
And here lies the problem. Up here in the northeast of England, we don't have the luxury of the Met or any other large body of people who are readily available to give immediate help.
Any terrorist attack, even the more complex ones, they tend to be over in an hour. We haven't got anyone coming in an hour. It's just us. So what we want to do, it's our responsibility to make sure that we can protect the public and the communities that we serve.
I'm Rosie, I live in Newcastle. I've got 3 children, 2 are at university, and I'm here today with my youngest, Robert, who's 9.
Hi, I'm Robert. I live in Newcastle with my mum.
Rosie England is just one example of a parent whose child has struggled with seeing more police officers with guns on the streets.
So we were shopping in town, just popped into town after school to get a few bits and pieces, and walking down Northumberland Street, and we saw a couple of armed police officers.
I took my mum's arm and gripped a bit tighter because it made me frightened that there was going to be a gun attack, and I heard that before there were some kids who had nightmares about the police actually doing it.
I kind of knew that they were perhaps there because of what had gone on in London, like the week before. But I think seeing the police in the city centre makes you wonder whether they know that there's something about to kind of kick off, something about to happen that you're not aware of.
I feel less safe because it makes you feel like there's going to be an actual attack. If there's an actual attack, you know that there's a lot to protect you. You're thinking it's going to become more dangerous when you know it isn't. It just makes you feel really nervous and not so safe.
Northumbria police say that their armed officers are not only there to make the public feel safer, but also to deter terrorism. However, in most of the attacks we have seen in the last few years, terrorists are not only determined to kill innocent citizens, but also themselves. I asked Inspector Galliot Thornton if suicide is a motivation, then why would a terrorist be put off by her armed officers?
Yes, they might not necessarily be put off, but we are capable of intervening at an earlier stage. Ultimately, it might not worry them that they could lose their own life, but their ability to kill more individuals is greater if there aren't armed police there.
For terrorist groups such as the so-called Islamic State, publicity is also a major objective.
The more people that die, unfortunately, the greater the news story is. And if they were to do recce's in Manchester, in London, in Newcastle, they're going to go to the place where they think they can carry out their plans more effectively. And if we've got armed officers out, inevitably it's going to put them off.
To find out more about what psychological impact the presence of armed police has on the public, I spoke to Jed Bales, a highly qualified consultant forensic clinical psychologist. Jed is vastly experienced and has given psychological consultation and advice to the press and broadcast media for many years.
Working as forensic clinical psychologist, you deal a lot with risk and crisis, mentally disordered offenders. So I've also had quite a bit of dealing with the police over a number of years, and since 1986 my specialty area with the police has been around siege management, hostage negotiation, and also firearms as well.
As well as being a well-known psychologist, he also knows exactly what it takes to become an armed police officer.
Well, I've experienced the basic firearms course. Basically, police officers volunteer to do firearms. They apply for it and they get references from their senior officers. There's some initial assessment and then they do the full course.
When humans see something that's dangerous, such as a gun, we can react in different ways practically. But psychologically, we all have the same primal mechanism that takes control.
Well, one of the key mechanisms is obviously the fight or flight reaction. Our brains are constantly monitoring the world around us for the presence of things that are different, that might be a threat. And within us, there's this automatic reaction. It's designed to help us survive. It's been in us for thousands of years. And basically, it causes the adrenaline to be released from your adrenal glands and your kidneys. Various things happen in the brain. And people have butterflies, they sweat, they breathe quicker, they feel shaky, they may feel change in their skin, their hearing changes, all of that. And it's basically to fight or run away from the threat.
A vast amount of research on the relationship between people and guns has been conducted over the years. Interestingly, some studies have even linked the mere presence of a weapon to subconscious aggressive behaviour.
They basically, in laboratory conditions, put some people into a study where they were annoyed by an individual who they thought was just part of the study. And they were then asked how much electric shock would they give that person. And when they were asked that, there was either in the room some guns or there was a badminton racket, some shuttlecocks. But what they found is the people who were making the decision about the electric shocks with the guns in the room, they actually went higher. So they demonstrated, according to the study, a more aggressive response.
So clearly the presence of armed police does have a psychological impact on the public. Whether that impact is blind panic or slight apprehension is very dependent.
I don't think there'd be one particular type of person, not so much a demographic, but what the factors are. It can put people's anxiety levels up. It could also be reassuring as well.
And that is the main debate. Are the people of Newcastle afraid or comforted? And more importantly, do they feel safer or less safe?
But are both less safe in that it makes me think that they perhaps know something and there might be a terrorist attack.
Yeah, I feel a lot safer just because if there was anything to happen, you just know they're there.
But then again, I suppose there is an increased likelihood that that will happen, so their very presence is a bit comforting.
It makes me feel a lot safer around the streets.
Yes, I think I do feel a lot safer with armed police.
There's a week in particular in Newcastle, the Hoppings. There's lots of crime there. I've been burgled twice when they've been there, so it's mainly just that week.
I think when it comes down to it, you'd rather be safe than sorry.
And what does our psychologist think?
On the one hand, the presence of the firearms makes me more aware of the threat, and I think it's a sad state of how things are in the world. On the other hand, you need to have some of that to protect people, to respond to the threat. And if you look at America in January to July 2016, what's that, 7 months, some 613 people killed by police with firearms. And if you look at the figures in this country, for 2016 there was 5 fatalities.
In countries like America, guns are much less unusual and all police officers have the right to bear arms. Sarah Withers is a student who moved from Newcastle to the States nearly 3 years ago to pursue her dream of becoming a football player. I connected with Sarah via Skype to find out whether or not she felt safer in South Carolina, where nearly all police officers are armed, or Newcastle, where there's relatively fewer.
Honestly, probably Newcastle, just because of the whole gun thing. I don't feel threatened. You only ever associate guns with bad things, with criminals and bad attacks and stuff. So hearing that police are carrying guns doesn't exactly sound good, but I think I understand why they would have them.
Back here in Newcastle, it seems that despite the fact that armed police are there for our own safety, there are still people who'd rather not see them. So how do Northumbria Police deal with those who aren't comforted by their presence?
We've been very proactive around our public engagement. We've had the absolute luxury of having some brilliant events. So, for example, the Pride event. The support we've had, when you think about the New Orleans nightclub incident, where that was particularly targeted to a certain aspect of our community, to have an event like the Pride where we've got armed officers deployed, the feedback we had from there. So it's about engagement. It was a very family-orientated event. You couldn't get past them. Kids, I want a photo taken, and the engagement there for us at events like that, it gives us the opportunity for that real community engagement. We actively encourage people to come up and talk to us, and the amount of feedback we get, it's phenomenal, and people are so appreciative of it.
What about a psychologist's opinion?
If anybody said to me, I'm uneasy and anxious about seeing armed police everywhere, I would say I totally understand that and I totally agree. It's not a pleasant thing to see. It would be nice if we didn't have armed police in airports and other places. The reality is it's needed when some of the threats that are certainly present. I think we have to take a responsible attitude towards it. We don't have to like it, but we perhaps have to understand the reason why it's there.
However, for some members of the public, seeing guns might not seem so scary at all. Perhaps the rise of shooter games, violent imagery in TV and films, and decreasing censorship in the news media will desensitise parts of our population.
Clearly it can have an effect. I think there's probably a familiarity. Anybody who's played shooter games knows what an MP5 is, the Heckler & Koch, the Glock weaponry. However, it's not a simple on-off switch. People who play lots of Call of Duty or some other game are going to want to go and shoot people. It doesn't work like that.
Like them or not, the current threat level across the country, and indeed Europe, means that armed police in Newcastle are here to stay. But over time, like any new stimulus in our familiar environments, perhaps we'll just get used to them.
It is a part of life. In the busy areas like the airport, the central station, the shopping centres, I think it will just become commonplace, but I think we're going to be lucky enough to retain this traditional British approach, but having those assets where they're most needed. They are basically bobbies on the beat. They're just armed.